This morning, I just posted this poor woman in Mississauga, 10 p.m. at a restaurant, car blocked in, 2 guns to her face to steal her keys, and they just flew off.
And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast, episode number 50. I am your host, Stefano. Guys, first and foremost, thank you guys so much for 50 episodes. I really appreciate it. All the liking, watching, subscribing, listening. I appreciate the support. And I look forward to the next 50 episodes with all of you. So big salute to you guys. And for today's conversation, my guest today is shining light on some very important issues we are having here in Canada with crime and auto theft. He runs social media accounts where Canadians send in their security home footage of criminals trying to break into their homes and steal their vehicles. So we're going to get into all of that, plus much more. So with that being said, I want to welcome Sonduren, aka Cars with Sonduren, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to kick off number 50 and then 50 more after that.
Yes, sir. Man, it's a milestone to say the least. 50 conversations, man. So welcome for the 50th, man.
Thanks for having me. I think it's an important topic.
I agree.
50.
That's what I was saying to you before, Pod. I'm very passionate about these crimes and auto thefts in particular that's going on. I think what you're doing, shining a light on that, and some other creators online that I do see, because it's happening so often, right, brother, that it's very important that we provide awareness to that. So I just kind of want to start there with giving you that thanks, because it takes effort, takes time, and I kind of want to get the backstory of it, so that maybe that's kind of where we can start for viewers and listeners to kind of get an idea of who you are a little bit, and what do you do in relation to what we'll be talking about today. So just explain to everybody what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Canadian, born and raised here all my life. I lived in Stony Creek, and now I live in Oakville, Ontario. Look, I started a car channel because I love cars. And it was just over the last 2 years that, my love for cars I started to become worried. I'm like, now there's all this talk about all these carjackings that are happening. And, at first it was like, I don't want my cars to be stolen because I love my cars so much. Then it became it clicked in my head. This is not about cars anymore. This is about the safety of Canadians. And I think everybody, new immigrants coming into the country, all of us, every Canadian, the biggest thing, everyone around the world, they think Canada equals safe place to be. And I saw that was at jeopardy. And I had people coming to me, giving me these stories more often than not, because they were telling me that from the media, from others, they're not accepting their stories. And they wanted some venue, some outlet to go ahead, share their story, to say, look, this is what's happened to me. And they really wanted to share their stories to protect others, right? Their fellow neighbors, their fellow Canadians. And honestly, the problem's gotten so bad over the last 2 to 3 years, especially. And I literally get dozens of these videos. And so now, while, I still talk about cars, a lot of the topic around it is about these home invasions, right? Where these criminals are breaking into people's homes, armed with weapons many of these times, and terrorizing them, right? And whatever happens in these home invasions, that's one thing. Hopefully, like, some of them, like, they're seriously injured, they go to the hospital. But This is trauma that people live with for the rest of their lives. And I've heard countless stories, not just from the people who are being impacted, but the police officers, the dispatchers, the ambulances, the community members. And it's really impacting the way of life for Canadians today. And so that's why I will continue, and people have been sharing me their stories to share that, so that, number one, we can drive awareness of this issue, make sure that all of us are, leveraging our voices to go ahead and raise this to the powers that be, that whether that's our federal government or provincial government, to take the steps that are really necessary to protect what I think, and what I think most Canadians think, is the number one priority for all of us, which is our safety.
Safety, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And it's well said. So you were passionate about cars, and then that sort of led to people giving you footage of their cars being stolen. Were you passionate about, like, public safety and crime and politics prior to this happening, or did this kind of bring you into that?
To be honest, this kind of brought me into it. Yeah, like, I cared about politics, I cared about crime and safety, but it wasn't something that was, like, top of mind as a big issue. Of course, like, in any country, there's always going to be some level of crime. That just totally makes sense. But what we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years is, like, this huge uptick in crime that was just unavoidable for anyone to go outside and not pay attention to. And it started to actually impact my friends, like, within my circle of friends, maybe my 10 best friends. How many of them? 3 of them had their cars stolen.
Really?
Home break-ins for them multiple times. I actually have this one friend, his house has been broken into twice, and he's had 2 of his cars stolen. It's actually unbelievable. In areas, by the way, that were typically seen as nicer communities, Burlington, Ontario, Oakville, Ontario. And we're seeing the crime kind of get out of the main area of the GTA and expanding into the suburbs. Vaughan as another example. So, and that's how it really all started. I got one video, I started to get more and more and more. I started to post about it, and people really started to rally around the content because they wanted to drive awareness of this issue. Because while yes, sometimes the mainstream media is covering it, I don't believe the mainstream media is actually covering the level that we're seeing to the degree that people should be actually put in their mind. Like, we should be empowering people to understand what is the true reality is of their community and the safety and the precautions they have to take, and make sure that matches expectations. I don't feel today the media is properly portraying the issues that we're facing and the gravity of the issues that we're facing today. And that is not doing right by the people. 100%. We need to make sure people are aware of really what's happening. Take steps to protect your home and put in multiple lines of defense to secure yourself better, while at the same time working together to voice our, opinions of what needs to change to the government, so that we can focus on the number one priority people love and come to Canada for, which is a safe living community and country for us to raise our family and children in.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And I'm interested to stay on that point for a second. Why do you think the media is not covering it as they should? Because this is happening rapidly and rampantly, rather. It's so significant, and it's happening so often that, like you just said, dozens of videos coming in a day to an independent creator. So why do you think the media is not covering this?
Look, I don't want to sound like I'm crazy, but I'm going to say this because I think it's important, and I really do believe this. I don't think the media wants to scare the population about what's happening. I don't think that they want this to be out there as much, and they want to temper it for reasons that maybe I don't even fully understand. But this is what I can tell you. You look at the statistics. Okay, look at the statistics. There's a 400% increase in home invasions that are marked by a car theft. So that's the purpose. There's a 534% increase in violent crime. These are numbers, statistically, you look at, unquestionable that this is a problem, right, over the last 2 to 3 years. Now, I did an interview. CBC News approached me for an interview. One of their journalists. We did the interview. I'm having a very similar conversation like we're having right now. They never aired the interview because I'm raising these points. And the question I had to them was, why? Why is this not being aired? Because I'm making a very, very data-driven remarks about what is happening. I also, the great thing is, I have over 250,000 followers. Many of them are from Ontario, Canadians. And so many people send me these videos. So it's like I have my own set of data, literally hundreds of data points of where this is occurring, how often it's occurring. And this is all publicly available information. By the way, the police put out these maps of where these break and enterings are happening. And so the data says something. The people that are here on the ground say something. And even in my anecdotal circle of friends and network, they're all saying the same thing. So why is it not being covered in the media? That's a great question. And it's something that I'm still at odds about, because I really think the media is supposed to be there to protect Canadians, right? It's about to expose and put light on the issues that affect us in our daily lives the most, and for us to go ahead and improve. And it's not about, putting blame on people. It's about looking at what is not working and then taking the appropriate actions to improve. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but what we can do is get together and improve on the things that we know that we can go do to provide a safer community for all of us.
Yes, and provide that awareness, which what you're doing, to then aim towards a solution.
That's right.
And I think the media issue, it can even go a step further, that I suspect there's some sort of government intervention to maybe suppress that, to control the fear of the populace, which I think you alluded to.
I think so, because look, at this point, there's a discussion, is it gross negligence? And I really thought about this, and I've been talking about this issue it's almost been 3 years where it's really ramped up.
Has it been 3? So it's 3 years since you started?
It's been about 3 years,
okay,
right? And it's kind of been upticking since. And it makes me question some of the things that we're doing. Like, I know Ontario came out with a proposition and a law that if somebody was doing this, they would take away their license. And I have to look at everybody and think, who's coming up with these solutions for the symptoms, and they don't actually make sense, right? Like, when you're looking to solve problems, you have to identify what the root cause of the problem is. And you put your focus on solving for the root cause, not the symptoms. And so over this period of time, I have to believe that it's no longer gross negligence. I think there's something broader at play here with the media and the government. And I'm convinced by this now because of the data, the amount of time that's happening, all of the people that are reaching out to me with their stories, and the fact that people are and our government is not doing enough yet to go ahead and actually nip this at the butt, I think it's a big issue for Canadians. I think for next year's election, it's going to be one of the top issues. I don't know of a bigger issue for my family, and I have a 2-year-old daughter, than safety.
100%.
There is no bigger issue. Safety has to come first. In an airline, what do they tell you about the masks? You put that mask on yourself first so you could survive, so then you can go focus on the other issues. We're not doing that right now. And so that's a concern that every Canadian should be aware of.
100%. I want to get into politics and some of the issues with crime there for sure. And just to stay on the data, for the people listening, if you want, like you mentioned, you can go to the police websites, Toronto police websites,
Statistics Canada,
where this is readily available for people.
Absolutely.
And it's maybe worth people to look into because they can see for themselves what exactly you're talking about. Right?
Absolutely. And what other thing bugs me is that, those stats that I shared with you, the media is not actually talking about to actually give the people the data to understand the gravity of the situation.
Right.
But recently they were talking about how there has been a quarter-over-quarter decrease in these violent crimes of 14%. But when you go up 500% and you come down 14%, that is nothing to celebrate. Yes. That is absolutely nothing to celebrate. It's very similar to the story in inflation. Yes, inflation is now down, but the cost of all of these goods and services that's the cost now.
Yeah.
Now we're all going to go pay that price, and now it's just going to slowly increase.
Right.
So this is the problem, and I think it needs to be very clear. Like, we're in a very dire strait, and I'm involved in many community group watches. In my Oakville community, as an example, in just my neighborhood, there were 6 break-and-enters in the last year. 4 car thefts, but then 4 where they removed the catalytic converters of the vehicles. So it is really something that the communities are worried about. And actually, recently, they just had 300 people at the Sheridan College Center to bring in the Oakville MPs and all of our community leaders to go talk about this issue. And so it is something that is top of mind for everybody now.
Good. That's why I think conversations like this bring awareness and then results into action, because you see some of the solutions, like you mentioned, we're going to remove the driver's license from criminals that probably don't have a driver's license. You know what that reminds me of, Sandra? It reminds me of Trudeau's attempt we're going to restrict firearms and stricten the rules for legal gun owners when criminals aren't really concerned about having legal guns.
Absolutely. And it's actually unbelievable. Look at the recent story. There was a woman in Lauren Park in Mississauga. She was by herself with her baby. 2 people pretended to be and were imposters of Enbridge. They had a safety hat on, vest. You have a gas leak. She opened the door. They barged in. They beat her up with the pistol, put a gun to her head, told her, give me where all your money is. You're safe. They tied her up, bound her. Now this poor mother is traumatized for life. Her community around her is traumatized. Everyone's scared and fearful. And how many of these break-and-enters are supported by these illegal weapons? And a lot of these people that are being caught are youths. And this could come into a greater conversation, but you can imagine, even if they don't intend to do this, in the spirit of the moment, they may accidentally even discharge those weapons.
Which does happen.
And kill people.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is something that, I don't know there should be nothing else on the news that we should be focused on other than first this.
Yes.
Everything else can wait.
Because it's happening so often.
It's happening so often.
And maybe let's talk about crime specifically. Let's try to investigate some of these things and we'll unravel some interesting topics. Let's just start basically with, what do you think is happening with the crime in Canada, specifically around the cities in Toronto and stuff? Why did it increase so much? What has happened for this to result in the way that it has?
Yeah, I wish it was a simple explanation, but I think it's very multifaceted. So if you look at kind of what's happened with the country, number one, we've had, by the way, all accounts of what I'm saying here is stuff that the government has said.
Right.
Unmitigated, unchecked mass immigration is number one. Our immigration numbers are 10 times the amount of the United States. And I understand. I'm a family of immigrants, by the way. Just let me tell you. My dad is Iraqi. My mom's Afghani. They came here, no English, worked a job. My dad was a cab driver. They started to come in and understand the Canadian values, assimilate. It was a struggle for them. We lived in a shelter for 2 years in our life. I understand, and the power of immigration, and now I feel like I can go contribute to the Canadian society and values, and that's amazing. But when you have 10x the amount of immigration with no background checks, no understanding of the assimilation, then that's one aspect that can cause the problem. The other problem is the fact that our economy is not doing well at all. If you look at the comparison, look at the US. Last quarter, they grew 5.3% in GDP. Our GDP growth was 1%. Actually, our per capita, which is the most important actually metric that ties to you and me and how we feel every day, our per capita GDP is down 8 consecutive quarters in a row. By all intents and purposes, we're in a recession. By all intents and purposes, we're in a recession here. So you have this unmitigated mass immigration that's happening, one. You have an economy that is actually struggling to even keep up with the existing population. Then you add all of this population with no jobs to support them, no infrastructure. We look at the infrastructure around us that's crumbling, our healthcare system that's crumbling, our innovation. We haven't been investing in innovation to go ahead and even support these local economies and jobs. And I think it's a combination of all these things. Then in addition to that, criminals here are not treated like criminals. I am more scared to drive 10 over on a 60 road than these criminals are scared to break in armed with weapons, groups of 5 or 6 of them, to go steal your vehicle. It's absolute madness. If I speak to children on the street and you ask the children what happens to criminals, these little boys and girls will say criminals go to jail. But that's not what's happening here. Many members of the Toronto Police, the Hamilton Police, the Peel Region Police, dispatchers, by the way, great, amazing people. They come to me, and I recently posted a video of a police officer, 17 years of public service. Incredibly, we're very thankful for that service. They come home crying because of the terror that they're seeing. And many of these officers, in the 1% chance that they do catch these criminals, they are released back out the next day to do these heinous crimes. And there's not a single Canadian that I speak to, by the way. And I speak to all walks of Canadians, right? I was born in a very multicultural city in Stony Creek. I know a lot of different people and different backgrounds. None of them I speak to don't believe that we should be putting these violent criminals in jail for the first time. This is unbelievable what is happening across our country and our communities. And I think it's a combination of the laws of our justice system, the unmitigated mass immigration, the economy, and a whole bunch of factors that have added to this. I wish it was an easy answer, but I think it's a multifaceted issue. But I really think there are solutions here that we can go and stem this immediately, but we're not acting on it today.
That's exactly right. I think it's well said, and I agree. I think it is a very multifaceted issue that we're having with crime, because it does. It's multiple of things that are happening that contribute to the end result, which we're seeing. And it's increased significantly over the years. Was there a point that you can identify that it started happening and that it really started to ramp up? Was it post-COVID?
It was post-COVID.
Okay.
I think it was post-COVID, absolutely. And it's hard to say, causation versus correlation. We bring in the data together. More research needs to be done on that, but definitely post-COVID. And I think the problem is just continue to escalate. And I think this is about, at this point now, these criminal crime rings are taking advantage of the system. They are absolutely taking advantage of the system. And by the way, I think they're also embedded. I don't think they are embedded. You look at what happened with Service Ontario. How many different busts in Service Ontario of the workers in the Service Ontarios are part of these organized crime rings, bringing the VINs over, getting the information to allow for these stolen vehicles to be properly registered.
So maybe let's talk about that for a second. How are these cars being stolen? That might be one point. So maybe explain to people what is happening, how are they stealing these cars, and that maybe they can find some way to add some prevention mechanisms to their life so they can protect themselves.
That's a great question. And it speaks to the heinous crimes that's happening and how little care and regard they have to actually our laws, because they started with these crimes through technological means. For example, you may have a wireless key fob, and what they would do, most people would hang their keys by their front door, and what these criminals would do, they would go up to the doors of these homes, bring in essentially a repeater,
right,
copy the signal of that key fob, and take your vehicle. It was that simple, and that's all that they were doing. So let's say that was one example. Another example is maybe they can't do that. Maybe you put your key in a Faraday pouch to block that signal.
Right.
What they would do is they would access your vehicle through either different portions of the car. In some cars, like a Lexus vehicle, they could access the headlight. That headlight connector connects to the ECU to reprogram a key. They would go into your vehicle. They may enter your vehicle through a way, like let's say you've locked in your vehicle, but you forgot your keys inside. CAA would come, put in something, open the door a little bit, put a little metal wire down and open the door, then reprogram the ECU. So by the way, all of this technology in terms of the computers and the programming is widely available. Right. And it doesn't take a genius to go ahead and do it. So all of them are doing that. But now what people have been doing, I think over the last year and a half, they started to be smart. They started to get engine immobilizers. They started to put their keys away from the front door, put it inside of the home. And guess what's happened now? These criminals are so brazen, they just said, you know what? That's fine. We're just going to break into these homes now and just take the keys. And while we're in there, take all of the valuables, and there's no regard for the community. There's no regard for the families inside, and they're terrorizing all of our families, all of our children in this country. And this is what's being allowed to happen. And this has been going on for many years now. And so now what we're seeing is, yes, they're trying to do these other ways of getting to these vehicles, but what they're going to do, there's no consequences for their actions. They're going to have 3 or 4 of them just bust into a home, take the keys, terrorize everybody, and just drive away with the vehicle.
Exactly, for a vehicle. So 2-part question. Why the hell do they want, like, what has happened with vehicles specifically that criminals want to steal it? Is it just that the repercussions have decreased? And then also the second part is that why the home invasions have increased so much? Because they're just breaking into the homes to get the keys to the car to then leaving. And are they getting caught? Is there any justice that's happening based on what you know?
Yeah. So in terms of why are they coming to steal the vehicles, I think, at least from my perspective, I don't think many people nowadays have immediate valuables in the house. I think probably the most valuable thing outside of jewelry, if you don't keep that in a safety deposit box or something, is probably your vehicle, right? What are they going to come? Steal your TV? They're coming here for a 50, 60, 70,000. Some of these vehicles are upwards of $100,000, $150,000. So very lucrative. And these vehicles are in demand in other countries like South Africa and in the Middle East. And so what's happening is most of these vehicles that are being stolen end up getting shipped to the port of Montreal. And this is a whole other topic. Literally tens of thousands of these vehicles are put into shipping containers and shipped across the world where they are sold to the highest bidder.
Like, that's the question, is how does that happen?
Well, how does it happen? Well, it requires a lot of sophistication. It requires organized crime, and it requires organized crime to penetrate our government agencies to allow this to happen. That's a great question. How does that happen where you bring together 3, 4, 5 people, tons of these groups, and there's hundreds of these people to break into these vehicles, go have plans to set up to remove their GPS units, to get them prepped and ready for shipping. Then these trucks come to pick them up, load them into shipping containers, make their way onto the QEW out to Montreal.
There's all these steps.
There's all these steps where they go into the port of Montreal, one of the biggest ports in Canada, and where they all get shipped off in shipping containers out to buyers in the Middle East and Africa. There's an entire chain here from top to bottom, from the registry in Service Ontario to the paperwork that's happening at the Port of Montreal. It's all happening like a real effective business. And that's what this is. There's so much money to be made in this, and that's how it's happening today. And people have been penetrated across the line. That's the only way this happens. This is very sophisticated, what's going on.
For sure.
It's an entire supply chain.
And I think we need to talk about prevention now, because we see that obviously the police are somewhat restricted on how they can act and where are the barriers that they have, which we'll talk about shortly as well. But let's talk about prevention. Based on your opinion and talking to Canadians, what can Canadians do in their own hands to protect their families, to protect their homes, to protect their property?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer that in 2 parts. I'm going to talk about what they can do now, and I'm going to talk about what I believe that we should all be doing in the future. So right now, I don't think there's a single thing that you could do that will say this will protect you 100%. It's about multiple lines of defense. So number 1, get a home security camera system. Absolutely have that in place with the lights that are bright at nighttime. You want to make sure to any criminal that's going to come to your home, you want to look like the worst option. Okay, you want to look like this is not the house that you want to go ahead and try. Security camera system. An immobilizer, some sort of way to protect your vehicle from being hacked into or being accessed. So, there's lots of different brands in the market. It could be an IGLA unit like I have, or a Ghost 2 product where when I get in, even if I gave you, Stefano, the key to my vehicle, you can't go anywhere with it. You need to put in a 4 to 6 digit code of any numbers in the vehicle to authenticate the vehicle before it drives away. So I feel comfortable. I have that on my Lexus, for example. No matter what, no one can take that vehicle unless they know my specific PIN. That's another example. Reinforce your doors. We talk about these break-ins. We used to live in a country where people's doors were open a lot of times. They weren't reinforced.
Like that. Yeah.
Exactly. We grew up in that, but that's no longer the case. So reinforce your doors. Most of these doors are thin as paper, and they just break in with one kick. Reinforce your doors, absolutely. So put 2 to 3 different reinforcements on the door frame. Put steel door frames in. That's going to make sure you're protected on all your entryways. The other major one is for your windows. A lot of these doors also have big glass panes. If you can, put either a window film protection, a security film, which will stop. If someone tries to break in, it'll stop the glass from shattering and keep it there. It won't necessarily 100% stop them, but it will delay them, this is all this is about. It's about delaying the risk of this and stopping it based on these different lines of defense. So that's another thing you do, or you can get obviously the barbed wires, whatever. The other thing is a Faraday box for your keys, right? You want to keep your keys away from the front door, put it in a Faraday box so they can't do the relay attack to get your key fob signal. So these are some things you can do, and then have a plan. In the event of an emergency, what is your plan in your household for your wife, your kids, your family? Have that all set up. These are some of the things you could do in the short term to help protect this. In the longer term, I think the solutions are pretty clear to me, and I've thought about this for a long time. Everybody has a mobile device. Your phone is worth what, $1,000, $2,000. Why? And when you get into your phone, you either authenticate with your face or with a PIN. I don't understand why vehicles that cost upwards of $150,000 do not have a way to authenticate based on the user in there.
Interesting.
Whether it's a fingerprint, whether it's a PIN system, whether it's Face ID, whatever. Either we have to mandate that for all manufacturers for vehicles, or we have to give the option for consumers to have that at the dealership. I think that's number one. Number two, this is very simple. We have to treat criminals like criminals.
For sure.
That's what we have to do. If a criminal looks at the reward of a $100,000 vehicle being this, and the risk being a pat on the back, don't do this again, here's a Tim Hortons gift card, we'll see you again, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to take that risk every single time. We need to make sure that the consequences for such crimes is so severe, nobody would evaluate that logically and say, you know what, I'm going to take that risk. Because that's just off the table. The consequences are so severe, I will not do that. And then number three, I really think we need to do this is in the Port of Montreal, with the technology that we have today, it does not make sense. We can go look at our US counterparts in the South, how they are scanning all of these crates that are going through their borders for many things. You're telling me that we don't have the ability to look into 2-ton vehicles loaded in these shipping containers to identify what is real and what is illegally obtained vehicles that are being shipped to the Middle East and Africa? I think that's insane. I think if you do a combination of these three things, I think this problem immediately goes away.
It's very well said. I think that's going to be useful for Canadians. Touching on most specifically is when criminals get arrested, they're getting released on bail. That's one of the things you talked about recently too. I want to bring up a situation that's happened recently. In the 401, you saw that there was an individual who was out on bail, a very violent criminal out on bail who was on the 401 shooting at cars at random, and then eventually, I believe, stole a car. So I'm going to get your opinion on this. Why are we releasing violent criminals who are doing violent crimes multiple times back into the public? I know it's a deeper issue, but touch on your perspective on what has happened on that 401 example and the issue of bail and maybe why the bail system is set up the way it is.
Absolutely. So the answer to your question is there is no answer to that question. It's insanity. It's insanity how we have these people running around in our communities and our streets doing this, and we're releasing them out on bail. And this is because, and to be very clear, because there's lots of confusion whether this is a federal issue or a provincial issue. The federal government mandates what our justice system should be doing for these violent offenders. And today, it allows them to get out on bail even for these violent offenses. That is the issue. And they could be repeated violent offenses and they will go out on bail. It's a federal issue. Then it becomes a provincial issue on the execution of those laws in our justice system to keep those people in jail. So it's a multifaceted issue there, but I want to be very clear. It is a federal decision and an issue that we have decided that these violent criminals get out on bail. And this example, can you ever think in your mind in Canada that would have happened?
Never.
Never.
And we're seeing examples like that very frequently.
Very frequently. It's crazy. This morning, I just posted this poor woman in Mississauga, 10 p.m. at a restaurant, car blocked in, 2 guns to her face to steal her keys, and they just flew off. This is happening every day. I wish I wasn't exaggerating about this. It really is happening every day, and it breaks my heart. I feel fully invested in this because of the stories. People call me, people send me these messages, they tell me these stories. I feel traumatized hearing this from my fellow Canadians. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. We need to change our laws so that we have some common sense around this. And I challenge Canadians that are listening to this, Write to your local MP. Call your local MP. Demand that the safety of your community is the number one issue, and demand that criminals be treated like criminals. It's just common sense. Demand that if somebody breaks into your house with a weapon to steal your vehicle, that they are not back out on the streets again.
Right.
And now the other issue to this, which is interesting because I believe, again, these organized crime rings are really smart about this. This is a big enterprise that they've done. There's a lot of money that's going through this. They are now hiring youths to go ahead and do these crimes because in our justice system, these youths are let out. Number one, their names are protected, of course, and they're let out with even far less consequences because of their age.
And the Youth Criminal Justice Act.
Exactly. That's exactly what is happening. Now, these youths coming in, I was a youth. I know. I maybe did some stupid stuff. Not stupid like this is insane. To go do this, to terrorize families, you're armed with a weapon? Can you imagine getting a gun at this age? There was a recent story of a 16-year-old getting a weapon, breaking into a house, and putting the mother and father at gunpoint for their keys. If youths are able to do this, they should be tried as adults.
Yes.
They should be tried for these crimes that are adult crimes. And this is another way organized crime have kind of infiltrated the system, unfortunately, is they've gone out to these, unfortunately, these youths that are put in this situation where they're even accepting this. And that's why I think it's a multifaceted issue, because even if these organized crime rings come to a youth and give them this opportunity, any youth should be able to now look at, oh my God, if I do this, but the risk is 10 years in prison with no bail, I can't do that for any amount of money. That's just not worth the risk. That's why I think we have to do multiple things to change this. This can't be one small thing to solve a symptom, another small thing to solve the symptom like the government's doing today. We need to go into the root cause, solve for multiple of those root cause issues, and I think this problem will go away. I don't know why our government's not doing this.
Yes, it's a legislative change that needs to happen.
Yes.
Criminals need to be kept in jail. And if there's a restorative process or a way you want to mediate and assist them in a way that you want, it's fine. But they need to be incarcerated first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not a mistake. People make mistakes in life. Let's be very clear. People deserve second chances. But is it a mistake to go find yourself? Remember, in Canada, we've banned weapons. We've banned handguns. These children, these organized crime rings are getting these weapons. They are taking these weapons and going actively multiple times, invading homes, putting these guns to the Canadian people's heads, to mothers, to fathers, to children.
Yeah.
It's there's no other words to describe it. This is disgusting.
And another part to this, which I want to talk to you about, is we have an issue with the response times from police officers and especially with these criminals and what's happening. The crimes happen. It's hard to get a police officer there. There's an influx of them. They oftentimes tell you to leave a report or whatever it is that you can because they're actually restricted based on the legislative rules, which is a deeper issue. But then there's the other side of it where us as Canadians have zero right to defend yourself or your property or your family. So they've taken away legal, they've demonized, Trudeau in particular has demonized legal gun owners. He's made response to situations that happen in the United States to then further restrict firearms. We have no right to defend ourselves. Criminals don't care about the laws. Criminals will always have a gun. We just won't.
That's right.
So one of the other issues that I strongly feel is that we do not have the right to protect ourselves or protect our families. The defense laws in this country need to be relooked at, and I'm hoping that a conservative leadership can really look at those seriously because us as Canadians, we're tax-paying Canadians. We go to work every day, we work hard, we contribute to the society. The criminals don't. They come here and they commit crimes, or they're going to different cities. They can either come from another country, they can either be born here, whatever the situation may be. But the fact of the matter is that they're enacting in crimes.
Absolutely.
So criminals need to be treated like criminals, and tax-paying, honest, good Canadian citizens that want to abide the law need to be given the right to be able to protect your home and family.
Absolutely. Especially in an event where, unfortunately, how many stories, there was a recent story 2 weeks ago I posted, this family, their house was invaded, they broke in, their entire family, 3 kids, went up to a room, they started calling 911. Nobody would answer. They called their cousin to call 911. Nobody would answer. The Toronto police later said that evening they had 50 911 calls that they could not respond to. Can you believe that?
Is it a resource issue? Is that what's happening?
It is. So this is where it becomes multifaceted. It is a resource issue. And this is why, again, it's like we've increased the population of Canada significantly over the last 4 years without a thought about the resources to support that population, which is crazy. And when it comes to housing, when it comes to our highways, when it comes to our healthcare, when it comes to our police services, right? They are not able to be resourced properly to go ahead and deal with the influx of volume. And that just makes sense. It makes sense. So it's strategically, to me, a failure of our government across various lenses of our country, which in combination has compounded to these issues that are ending up blowing up, right? And it is a multifaceted issue. But again, and now Canadians, with all of this said, don't have the right to protect themselves.
That's right.
Are in fear that if they take action to protect their families, that they will be the ones that go to jail. Can you believe this?
Yes, it's actually baffling.
What world are we living in?
Yes, this country is disappointing.
And what people don't understand too is that put yourself in a situation where this happens, you are immediately terrified. What happens in shock? People don't necessarily act that the way that they think they should when they are in shock. This is normal. That is the definition of shock. So then you have these laws. Imagine me as a father and I have a 2-year-old daughter. I'm in a state of complete panic and terror. And the actions that I do, I'm not going to necessarily be thinking about I might be incarcerated or incriminated and put in jail. What am I thinking about in a situation like this? I'm thinking about I will do everything to protect my wife that I love and my daughter that I love.
That's exactly right.
And we are putting these law-abiding Canadian citizens in the crosshair of being put in jail
Yes.
from these criminals. I cannot believe that this is the conversation or that we have allowed this to happen in this country, and we need this immediate change to happen.
And it's a legislative change, which we're going to talk about politics next. The defense laws are comedic. It is reasonable force. So, for example, if a criminal were to come in, depending on the weapon that they have, you need to use reasonable force in accordance to that. But how do you know that, to your point, in a state of shock? A criminal comes in, they're wearing masks, they're wearing all black, they have hidden pockets. How do I know what this criminal
You
has?
don't.
So
You don't.
It's like if they enter my home, it should be automatic. You are now invading our safety. We should be able to do whatever means necessary, even if it's death.
Absolutely.
At that point, to protect your family.
And no one wants that. Nobody
Of
wants
course.
that. Of course, nobody wants that. But you've put yourself in that situation where you're masked up with 3 or 4 individuals
in my home.
in your home. First off, number one, even if these individuals had no weapons, I would be feared for my life. I would fear for my life. It doesn't matter. There's 4 males that are breaking into my home. I'm not prepared.
Yeah.
They could take my life. They could take my family's
That's right.
life. They
That's
don't
right.
need a weapon to do that when you're outnumbered like that. You need to do what you have to do to protect your family. Now, in an ideal world, we never want to even come to that situation.
Of course.
We need to do everything we can to mitigate that risk from ever happening, put in stops around what needs to happen with our justice system, the consequences for these criminals, making sure we put the right protections in our homes in place. But when it comes to that point, no citizen should feel there's a risk of them being put in jail when they're put in a state of shock and terror to protect their family and their kids.
There was an incident in Milton. Maybe you can touch on it. I believe it was Milton, where an individual came in. I think there was multiple individuals with a firearm, and the person who was protecting the house, who lived there, is the son of the mother that was in the home, had a firearm as well. He ended up shooting and killing one person. He was charged with, I believe, manslaughter.
Yes.
Of some sort. Are you familiar with
Yes,
the case?
I am familiar.
He ultimately did get off.
That's right.
But he had to go through a lengthy process
yes.
to then get to that state. Right?
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like that shouldn't even be happening in the first place. And what I think we need to do, again, is this is not going to change unless all of us voice our concerns about this and demand change for this. Because here's the reality now. The reality is this is not something that, this has happened to this one person. I don't need to worry about it. It's never going to happen to me. I think now we've gotten to the point, statistically, we've gotten to the point anecdotally. I speak to people that know people that this has happened to. Everybody now needs to take this on as the number one thing that they raise to everybody in our government. Mm-hmm. So I want everybody that's listening to this, raise it to your local MP. This is all you should be talking about because safety has to be first. And this happening in our country, and this is not the country that I was born and raised in.
That's right.
This is the opposite of what I thought for my daughter. This is not the country that I want her to go into.
That's
today.
exactly right.
We need to do better. That is literally how we came to this beautiful country is things started to improve. Now they've started to degrade, and we need to change that more than ever.
And we're going to talk about politics right now, but one last point on police and self-defense. There was an interesting video, and it ran its course on the internet, where the police officers were saying, leave your keys at your front door for criminals to come and take it. And then they had to walk that back because it was quite an interesting statement. Then people of the internet, like they always do, they paired it up with the situation that happened in Florida. And the police officers in Florida were saying, we actually encourage you to shoot and kill a criminal that's coming onto your property and try to invade your home.
Yes.
To see those, like, we're all humans, but to see the perspectives and the changes is a very interesting thing for me. I look at it like that and go, wow, this is how the Americans encourage their tax-paying citizens to protect their homes and families. They actually welcome it.
Absolutely.
And you look at Canada, and they're actually telling you to just hand your keys to the criminals.
Absolutely. And I will say, I think for that police officer, when he was saying that, he was speaking in the context of the unfortunate reality of our justice system and what's happening today to protect people. If that's what they were going to do, they would take the keys and save you. But strategically, and a voice of the police to say that out in public has only emboldened these criminals.
That's
it's
right.
essentially a free ticket to say, well, the police know that they've given up and that the citizens of this country is going to give up. We're just going to do it more and more. And I think that actually happened. I think we saw an uptick because of that statement. And it just speaks to the fact that, by the way, the police do feel helpless in a lot of this. I speak to many police officers who have full respect for the people that risk their lives for us to protect our communities. I have full respect for them. They're in between a rock and a hard place. I can't imagine what I would do if I was a police officer to put my life at risk, to take some of these criminals off the street, then see them walk out the next day. Think about how you would feel.
It's very demoralizing. It's very
Demoralizing.
And I feel for the police officers. I definitely back the blue and I support police officers. At one point, I had a desire to be a police officer. I have an amount of respect for them that I can't even express. There was a whole initiative around COVID about defunding the police, and they were very much demonized through that process. And I think we saw that shift from the United States to Canada, that there was this culture around the demonization of police officers. So I definitely feel for them because they're the ones running into buildings when we're running out. So I have a lot of respect for them. So thank you for any police officers listening. Let's talk about politics. Let's talk about the issue, the actual concrete of the issue now. How do you think politics is playing into what we're experiencing today? And can a change in leadership, or is the current leadership the problem? Can a change in leadership maybe aid us into some solutions here? What is your opinion on it?
Yeah, look, my opinion on this is something that our current leadership, by the way, has been in power for, I believe it's been 8 years. It's been 8 years that they've been in power. And across not just the crime and the safety of our communities, but again, across every other indicator of our country's prosperity, whether it's our economy, our infrastructure, and immigration policies, all of them have been a failure. Let's be honest here. How does our neighbors down south, our biggest trading partner, we are blessed to be geographically located to the biggest superpower in the world, the United States, and you're telling me our GDP per capita is going down 8 quarters in a row, and their GDP is going up 5% quarter over quarter? This is just an unmitigated disaster. A little background, I'm a business professional. I'm a marketing leader. I've been involved in various Series A to C software companies. I was a former corporate accountant. I understand a little bit about business, let's say. What's happening with our economy today is an unmitigated disaster. It is baffling to me that this is allowed to happen with all the people that, Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland surround themselves with.
That's right.
It doesn't make any sense. The immigration policy is a failure. Actually, the United Kingdom Prime Minister just announced the open border policies that they had have been a total failure. This just happened yesterday. Look at what's happened with crime. We just talked about this entire time. Been a total, complete disaster. So I think the government policies, to be honest with you, we don't have people in place in our government that can't. I wouldn't trust them to run a daycare. How can we trust them to run a G7 country? They have no experience. Why does our finance leader have a Russian literature major and not work in background of finance or banking? You just look at the details. Look, if they were in the private sector, all of them would be fired. I would have lost my job a long time ago.
That's exactly right.
Like, people hold themselves, I go to my work, I have KPIs to hit. I have stakeholders that I need to go ahead and deliver on. If I don't do that, I'm going to be gone. What's happened, unfortunately, in our government is that we've had this happen, and we can't remove this government for the last 8 years we've been stuck with. And it's deteriorated this country to the point that we're experiencing what we're experiencing today.
And there's no accountability. Where's the
accountability?
There's no accountability.
Where is the accountability of where we are going as a country? There is none. It doesn't make any sense. There's accountability at the daycare that my daughter goes to. There's accountability at my jobs. There's accountability at your job. Every Canadian that works, you're held accountable to something.
That's right.
Our government's not held accountable to anything right now. They have failed on all measures, if you look at it.
That's exactly right.
On every single measure. I don't look at a single thing in our country right now that has been progressing positively. Everything's been taking a step back. And this is not to say, by the way, we are blessed to be in this country of Canada. I love the country. I love the people, the opportunity. We should be all very blessed, especially if you look at what's going on around the world. But that doesn't mean we should be okay with going backwards. That's not how we even got to this point. That's not what we want for our children. So I think at this point now, Stefano, almost anybody would do better than what is happening right now. Almost anybody. At this point, I think we need to change. I think what Pierre Poilievre has said, there's a lot of things that he will change, and I believe it will be for the better. But the other thing I really hope for in the future is that our politicians and the leaders in cabinet surround themselves with people that have experience in these issues and are able to drive accountability for hitting the objectives that we want to hit. So whether that's driving innovation in our economy, whether that's reducing the amount of violent crime in our communities, whether that's understanding and making sure we have proper background checks for the amount of immigration that we're having in the country. All of these things, we need to hold ourselves and hold our government to account. And without that, we end up in the situation that we're in today.
That's right. And I think you said it beautifully. They failed on every metric. And I think even ethically, too. How many ethics violations has Trudeau and the Liberal government had? There's almost a new scandal every week. It's unbelievable. I've only been interested in politics for a short period of time, since about 2016. And since then, so my experience isn't vast, but I'm sure that anybody who's a political politician, professional, would tell you that they've never seen the amount of failures across the board like the Liberal government has now.
And you just have to remove actually whether this is not about I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a Green Party supporter. I want you to evaluate the people that are running our country on what their strategy is and their ability to execute. Just like in the real world. Nobody cares when I'm doing my job, whether I'm this leaning or that leaning, or whether I'm black, white, brown, whatever it is. They care about, are you delivering on what we brought you in to do?
That's right.
Our government has not delivered on anything we have brought them in to do. So we need to hold them to account. We need to get rid of them, just like any job. And we need to get somebody in role that can go do the things that we want them to do, which is to bring back safe communities, to bring back an economy that's actually self-sufficient, to bring back control around our borders, to bring back equilibrium between our immigration and how we can support those new immigrants coming for the life that Canada promised them.
That's right. We need to be able to. Immigration is a beautiful thing. My families are immigrants as well. Incrementally and constructively, and in a way where it's controlled. Controlled, yes. To have this influx the way we have, it's destabilizing us in more ways than one. But Canadians want to hold the government to account. But the problem is, no matter what we do, when we use our voice, or as soon as we get to the polls, I think things will change. But you have this bureaucracy, and you have other governments like the NDP party who are propping up the Liberals, even the amount of failure that they've demonstrated. Other governments, for ultimate control and autonomy, they want to prop up the Liberals, whether it's even, you saw it with when NDP revoked their support for the Liberals, the Québécois supported them and kept them all for selfish needs. When Canadians want change,
that's right.
The media and Liberals will tell you that we don't want to go to the polls. They'll tell you everything opposition to what you've just been articulating. But the fact of the matter is that we are ready to go to the polls, and 2025 can't come soon enough. I thought that it maybe would have happened recently, because I think that based on the points that we've been talking about today, Canadians will be voting differently this time around.
I absolutely agree. And I think, again, it's unfortunate that at the end of the day, these politicians, who are they supposed to serve? Their constituents. They're supposed to serve us, but they're serving other desires that they have first before they're actually serving us.
Right.
I don't think there's a single person in this country that I speak to on a daily basis that doesn't want an election. I think Canadians are fed up at this point. I think what we're seeing now is, and this is very unfortunate, a lot of people that are scared and are in despair and actually worried about the prospects of what Canada holds. And so I think now more than ever, we need change. I think now more than ever, we need somebody to come in to right the ship in this country, to make the country everything that, immigrants from around the world, Canadians, our children always think of as Canada, right? Mm-hmm. We need to bring that Canada back.
And do you think Pierre Poilievre is somebody who can do that?
I think so. Now, I will never say that until I see the actual execution of everything that he talks to. There's one thing to talk about it, which is great. And I think a lot of the things that he's saying is actually going to be beneficial for the country. But the other important part is execution. Justin Trudeau and this Liberal government have talked a lot about what they're going to do over the last 8 years. They have executed on none of it. None of it. There's been no execution. So what we need to do, even with this new government that will come into the next year, Canadians need to make sure that we hold them accountable. We need to hold everybody that's in our government that's running this country accountable, regardless of what political party they belong to. We should treat them all the same.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what the Liberals have, we saw what they promised and what they haven't done, but some of the things they have done is they've implemented legislation that has restricted Canadians' freedom of speech, their ability to use the internet and speak freely. That's happened with Bill C-11, Bill C-18, and then also with repealing mandatory jail time. That's a Liberal bill that got put through. I believe it's Bill C-5.
Yes.
I had Ron Chinzer on, who's a Conservative representative. He talked about Bill C-75. So this is legislation that was put forward by Liberals, so that we need to understand, as Canadians listening, you have power. And you want to know how you have power? At the voting box.
That's right.
I understand some Canadians are apolitical and they don't care about politics. I was one of those Canadians, Sandra.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, when you start to pay bills, when you have family, when you are getting your rights infringed on, with your just ability to be able to speak freely or use the internet services freely, to be able to post on social media freely or access information freely, that's when I think Canadians who are apolitical start to get involved and go, what's exactly going on here?
Absolutely. And I think, yes, go to the voting box and put your vote in, but at the same time, voice.
That's right.
Share what you are seeing. Make sure that actually you're doing the work now to inform people, your community, your friends about what's happening and what matters to you and what should matter to everybody in your community and your way of life. Absolutely. I think that's what we need to start doing. And look, I even felt the same way. I was apathetic to going ahead, and a part of me, when I started hearing these stories in the very beginning, when I started reporting on it, I was honestly going through a tremendous amount of stress. Hearing these stories, it was heartbreaking. Just the amount of violence and crime and the impact it's having to Canadians and mothers and children. It was honestly just jolting my heart. And a part of me thought, I got to step away from this. I got to put blinders on and just get away, because it was impacting me. Like, I think a lot of my gray hairs over the last couple of years have really sprouted out because...
You're very passionate about it, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, because really, it's impacted me in a way so deeply, because I feel now I have the sense that I am the voice for many of these Canadians, that they're sharing their stories because they feel they're not heard, whether they're not heard by their government, whether they're not heard by their MPs, whether they're not heard by the mainstream media. They're coming to me and telling these stories, and I feel like I have a responsibility now in a channel to go ahead and share their voice and share their stories. So that's going to inform people in the decisions that we make at the ballot box coming up in the next election.
That's exactly right. And long may you continue. Keep up that great work, because we do need it and we need that awareness. Now, for Canadians listening, imagine we'll talk about some of these stories. Now, we'll talk about what has happened from your perspective. Let's touch on that more. But for a Canadian out there that's listening that this hasn't happened to, been fortunate enough. Imagine you're in a situation where somebody breaks into your home with weapons, steals your vehicle and other properties, leaves, gets away with it. You contact the police, they're unable to assist you, and then nothing happens after that. What you provide is a vehicle for that, to them, to get that story out there, to at least provide awareness. Now, they have to go through their insurance companies and try to get the values back in the best way that they can.
Which they don't, by the way.
Okay.
This is another big thing that people don't talk about. They think this is a victimless crime. Insurance will pay for it all. This is absolutely not true. This
Does
is
your
the
premium
biggest...
go up as well? Is that another thing that happens?
Absolutely. Your premium will go up. You're left with a big deductible. And often a lot of people may not have gap insurance, for example, and the value that the insurance company offers them for their vehicle is now far less than what they thought they would go get in the open market. How many stories of Canadians come to me and say, look, this happened to me. The best outcome happened to them, where their house was broken into, but their family was safe and unharmed. They're out financially, $10,000, $15,000 on a loss when it comes in totality of the entire cost of getting a replacement vehicle. And then it happens 3 weeks later again.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That is uncrazy. That is so crazy, and it's unbelievable to think that this is what gets me the most. A tax-paying citizen of this country is actually on the shorter end of the stick when it comes to these sorts of things. So talk to us a little bit about these stories that you're getting every day. What does the DMs look like? Are they just flooded with just people's stories? Are you engaging in conversation with these people? What does that look like?
Yeah, honestly, flooded. I can't. So I do all of this part-time. I work full-time as a marketing leader in a software company. So I try. I do my best to try. I probably only end up posting 15% of the content and the stories that come to me. A lot of them are unfortunately too violent. I was speaking to you earlier that one of the posts where They were robbing this woman at a Mississauga restaurant, put a gun to her head to take her keys. You know, I got striked on TikTok for that as an example. How do they come to me? They send me direct messages, whether it's on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, and they say, Sonduren, I've been watching your stories. This just happened to me or my family member. Here's the video. I spoke to the police. The police said there's really nothing that they can do about it because, again, the police, in a lot of these circumstances, their effectiveness on what they're able to do is very minimal, number one. Right. Number two, it's happening so often, they don't even have the resources to address all of this crime. It's literally happening dozens of times a day. And so they share me the stories. Mm-hmm. They go to their MP, they hear nothing back. They go to the mainstream media, the news, they hear nothing back. So who do they come to? They come to me, the guy that's reporting on this, and they share this and say, they come to me and what they want to do is they want to share the story just to drive more awareness to protect other families.
That's right.
I think that's the biggest thing, actually, when I speak to people. They're terrorized. They're petrified. They're trying to recover. They don't want the same thing to happen to their fellow Canadian citizens. They come to me and say, Sonduren, please share this. I know it's horrific. They think about it from their perspective. It's going to be a video that's out on my platform for everyone to see. They're going to see it in their families. It's horrifying for them to relive that. But they want it out there to protect others. That's why I love Canadians and I love this country. We're trying to all bound together to really make an impact in our communities, and that's what they're doing. And so I feel like I have the desire and will to continue to share those stories, and I'm a vehicle and a vessel for them, and to make people aware of the actual reality. Because I think, again, there's a mismatch of the mainstream media talking about the gravity of the issue is here, but the actual gravity of the issue is here. And the problem with that is that then people are not taking the right steps to protect themselves because there's this disparity here. Mm-hmm. I want people to actually understand the truth of what's going on so that they can prepare themselves and protect them and their families now, while also voicing their concerns to our leaders to make the change that we need.
That's
now.
Exactly right, because we need the change, and the awareness brings that change.
Yes.
So that's why I appreciate what it is that you're doing, and I think Canadians do too. And we are in it together. So for the people listening and to listen to this conversation, prevention, use your voice, and get your voice out to your MPs. Use your power at the ballot box. Absolutely. And let's continue to support each other. So with that being said, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your efforts. I have a final segment on Couple Casuals podcast, which I call Salute. I give an opportunity to the guests to end us off with a quick salute. Couple Casuals is almost like it's fitting for the cheers almost. I'm Italian. We like to give a salute. So I give you the floor, Sonduren, to end us off with a quick salute.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on. And thank you for every Canadian that's out there, again, sharing those stories. And again, sticking up for everybody. This is what I love about this country. Team Canada. That's what I really feel. And I feel over the last year and a half, Team Canada is rallying together. I look at this mountain that we have to climb together as a country and as a people. We can do it.
We can.
I know that we can do it. I get the sense from Canadians of every walk of life that we need that change, and there's a desire to go make better things happen for the country. So I'm really excited. I've always believed in this country and the people, and I know that we can do it.
That's amazing. Your voice is stronger than you think, guys. 50 episodes. Thank you guys so much. I love you, nobody else. Until next time. Salute.